Good evening, everybody. Oh, thank you for saying that back. My name is Jen Summers. I'm the director of the Houston Ballet Academy, and on behalf of our artistic directors, Julie Kent and Stanton Welch, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's dance talk. Yes, please give them. So tonight we're going to really hone in on Sir Christopher Bruce and him in general, but also through the lens of Rooster. But before we get started on that, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Rock, Roll, and Tutus program. So this program is comprised of 4 ballets, one called Illuminate by Academy alum Jacqueline Long. If you saw, yes, please give her a round of applause. If you saw the Jubilee of Dance in 2023, you saw that piece, and that is coming back, and we're very excited to see that. Also featured on the program is Brett Ashida's What I Was Thinking While I Was Waltzing, which was on last year's Jubilee program. Yeah. And then closing the program will be an extended version of Stanton Welch's V et Animo, which he also created for the Jubilee in 2023. And now he has extended that piece to include the entire Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto, so you'll see that as well. So, yes, that's the Tutus part of Rock, Roll, and Tutus. And what we're about to do is to dig into the rock and roll. That's what we're doing tonight. We're doing the rock and roll. So before we get started, just a reminder that behind you on either side of the risers are the doors to use should you need to leave at any time during this conversation. And I would love if you would just silence any noise-making devices before we get started. And then I'm going to do a little reading because I'm assembled for you today an amazing panel, and I want to make sure you know all about them. So to my left is Christopher Bruce, and this is a very abbreviated bio. I do recommend that you, A, look in the program, B, look on the website for all the things about him, because boy, what a career. Christopher Bruce trained at the Ballet Rambert School and then danced and choreographed for the company for many years. He was also associate director, associate choreographer, and served as artistic director of the Rambert Dance Company from 1994 to 2002. He has choreographed for many prestigious companies around the world, including Netherlands Dance Theater, the Royal Danish Ballet, and English National Ballet, where he also served as associate choreographer. In the United States, Houston Ballet has long been Christopher's home. The company has 12 of his ballets in its repertoire, including 4 ballets created specifically for our dancers. He served as resident choreographer of Houston Ballet from 1989 to 1998 and associate choreographer from 1998 until 2021. His ballet Rooster was created, I'm going to try to pronounce this well, for Le Ballet du Grand Théâtre de Genève in 1991, and it had its Houston Ballet premiere in 2005. We are thrilled to have it back on stage, as I said, bringing the rock and roll to the program. Welcome, Christopher Bruce. To his left is Kelly Meyernick, who currently serves, you can cheer her, sure, as principal instructor for the Houston Ballet Academy. She oversees the school's contemporary program, represents the school at national and international dance events and competitions, and is one of the primary coaches for Houston Ballet too. Kelly is an Academy alum who had a 13-year career with Houston Ballet, retiring as a first soloist in 2014. I think you and I had different dates, so it's either 13 or 14. One of us has it right. In her time with the company, she danced in many Christopher Bruce ballets, including Rooster, and she originated the role of the mother in Hush. So welcome to Kelly. And to her left is Tyler Donatelli, who is the Houston Ballet Guild first soloist. Yay, cheer her. Tyler is also a graduate of the Houston Ballet Academy. She joined the company in 2014, was promoted to demi-soloist and then soloist in 2017, and to first soloist in 2022. Though she has learned both ghost dances and Hush, Rooster will be her first time performing in a Christopher Bruce ballet. So welcome to Tyler. Christopher, as I look out at this audience, I know that a lot of people here already know a lot about you. But I thought for those who don't, it would be great for us to hear a little bit about how you began choreographing. So we know you had an illustrious career as a performer, but I'm curious about how you made your way to choreography. Yes, it's on.
You want to know how?
Yeah, how you got to choreography from dancing.
When the Rambert Company in 1966 reformed into a more contemporary group, Norman Morris, the director at the time, allowed any dancer in the company to make work. Now Rambert, since it was founded in 1926, Rambert had no money and no sense of organization. She was hopeless, but she was a wonderful director in terms of how she drove the dancers. She had a wonderful eye, and she picked out certain people. She couldn't afford to bring choreographers in, so she had to make her dancers in the company make the work. And so people like Sir Frederick Ashton, Anthony Tudor, etc. were discovered, and they made wonderful works. And so what Norman was doing in 1966 was going back to this tradition of developing choreographers from within the company. And for the first year or two, it never occurred to me that I would ever choreograph. I enjoyed dancing in people's work, and I was very, very busy dancing in a very full repertoire. And then it suddenly occurred to me one day that maybe I'd like to have a go, see if I could actually do it. And so I made my first work in 69, 70. It was called George Frederick. It was 15 minutes long, to a Handel trio. And I remember saying to Glenn Tetley, a wonderful choreographer that I worked with around that time, it was so difficult, I'll never do it again. And he said, you will, Chris. And somehow I kept having more ideas. And in those early days, I think I was very influenced, particularly by Tutus' work, but I was influenced by everything I saw. And I was like a sponge. I stole ideas and then developed them in my own way, and gradually developed a craft, and that's how I started.
So you mentioned Tudor as an inspiration. Were there other choreographers whose work that you feel influenced yours?
That's why I'm not hearing if you take the microphone.
Okay. You mentioned Tudor as an influence as a choreographer. Were there other choreographers whose work was influential to you at the beginning? Or
Yeah, I certainly Walter.
He flew in from England today.
Working within Rambert, but I think Glenn Tetley was a terrific influence in those early days. And then people like Louis Falco, who emerged out of the Le Mans company and was very, very big as a choreographer in the 70s, going into the 80s, and a beautiful dancer. And it's amazing that no one dances his work anymore. It's quite frightening the way that real talent emerges and is on top of the world for a while and then suddenly disappears. And he died tragically early. But Anna Sokolow I worked with, and she was a powerhouse, and I was very influenced by her. But I looked at everything. I looked at social dancing, ballroom dancing, and my early days were I studied tap dancing and acrobatics, and all those ingredients have gone into my work at one time or another. So just don't let anything pass.
Well, that's a perfect transition to my next question, which is, though you were trained and performed quite a bit of ballet, your work isn't full of ballet steps per se. You've created your own movement vocabulary.
Yeah, I was trained as a classical dancer and danced in many classical ballets before I started in '66 doing regular Martha Graham classes. And we did these alongside classical classes. So both techniques were in the bodies of the company at that time. And I found that that is where I really discovered the root of my movement, in the torso with the contraction and release. And then by extending it into classical lines and using my classical technique alongside this basis, I created my own movement. And it was very much based on how I moved. And there was a dancer called Gary McSween, who is about 8 years older than me, and as a very young dancer of 20, I was put together with Gary, and so I was, as a very raw kid, partnering Gary, who was a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful senior dancer in the company. And she told me years later that we had a party after a performance somewhere. This was in the early days, between '63 when I joined the company and '66 when Norman Morris took over the directorship. And she saw me dancing to rock music. It was probably the Rolling Stones. I was really going. And I think that was the point where she had an idea. And she took me aside, and when we had a virtuoso dancer called Jonathan Taylor in the company, and he danced all the solo roles in Don Quixote. And when he was injured, she took me by the scruff of my neck and started rehearsing me in all these roles, these solos, which I wasn't anywhere near ready to do. I did not have the technique or the experience. I was a kid. But she drilled me till my legs were giving way. And things like there's a solo on a table where you did sous-sus, double tour, knee pirouette, stand up. And I remember the first performance when I did get on stage, the whole company looked away because they weren't quite sure whether I would still be on the table when I finished that section of the solo. And somehow, because she believed in me and she rehearsed me so hard, it gave me belief in myself. And I took this huge step from being a raw kid who was not really in control of his limbs. I truly was not at that time. I was skinny, scrawny, and over that period of about 3 or 4 weeks, I changed and got on stage. She gave me the confidence, and when you have the confidence, you can do it. And I did it. And from then on, it put me in a position so that when Glenn Tetley came and started teaching Piero Lunaire, I actually got that role. I didn't expect to get it, but I did. And that, again, took me up another step. I'm the luckiest person I know in this business. All the right things happened at the right time. And especially if you consider that I never intended to be a dancer when I went to dancing lessons. I was told by my father that it would help strengthen my legs so that I would become a better soccer player. I wanted to be a footballer. And because I'd had polio as a baby, I had a weak right leg. It was perhaps a good idea, but somehow it was just a terrible accident. I ended up a dancer, not a footballer. And so, my life is a series of accidents, happy accidents. And here I am sitting today, having choreographed for the wonderful Houston Ballet. How lucky can you get?
I like that, yeah. But you leveraged the luck. You leveraged it. You leveraged the luck, right? When you have luck comes, but I love that. I want to just circle back to that and just shed some light on that idea of you do have to in order to do the hard work to become something, you have to believe you can get there. And you're saying she helped you believe that in yourself so that you could then, when the luck came about, you could do the hard work to make each moment successful, right? I mean,
It's about grabbing opportunities, never let them pass. And I remember when I was working regularly with Netherlands Dance Theatre, another wonderful company. I was working over a period of about 14 years off and on with them. And Yuri Killian, the director, said to me, Chris, I want you to know that you can always come here and make a flop. That it won't stop me asking you to keep coming back. And the thing is that choreographers have to take risks. They must be allowed to fail. And one of my concerns about younger choreographers of today is they're not given enough opportunity to fail, to experiment, to take chances, and then be given another chance. You see choreographers with real talent emerging, and somehow they disappear. And I think I was born again at a lucky time. There were not so many choreographers around. I had plenty of opportunities. And I keep making, every time I speak publicly, I make a plea for choreographers to be given more opportunities and fail and try again. It's so important.
yes. That's the learning process in general, right? I mean, we talk about that with our students at the academy all the time, that mistakes are how you learn, taking risks are how you learn.
Yeah.
So Kelly, I'm going to turn to you because two things. It was one question, but now it's two. So that experience that Christopher had about being really pushed, about being believed in, but and pushed, is that an experience you have in the studio with Christopher?
Yes. I think so. I mean, I can remember the first time ever dancing one of your ballets was Ghost Dances, when you hadn't come to work here in a long time, and I was a new dancer in the company, and I don't think I've ever been so exhausted because you just wanted to do it again and again and again and again, and there's always more finesse and detail and depth that you can find in it all. So that was maybe self-driven, but something in Christopher's process is you are always dancing in the studio. It's not, the second cast is not sitting on the side. You are up and working and doing full out, and then he'll say, let's see the second group. And you've really just done the ballet. And now you come to the front, which is taxing, but also that preparation allows the kind of freedom that you really need to find. I mean, I think you have your reasons, and it really, to get that in your body, find the cohesion of the piece. I mean, I think it's an exhausting but really important part of that process. And I think no one it's not a culture of being afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah.
I don't find that in your environment.
And what about the second piece of that, which was my original question? We were talking about Christopher's influence and having been ballet trained, but really he absorbed so many different dance styles to make his movement vocabulary. Would you say he has a movement vocabulary as a dancer who's done a number of his works? Is there a Christopher Bruce way?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can tell when something is Brucey. I think just in terms of pure steps, there are a few kind of recurring or recognizable steps or motifs that I think speak to you. But I would say that it's more of a, I don't know if the word system sounds kind of clinical, but there's a system and a methodology for how you move from one movement to the next, and how you use your back, and how one movement falls into another, that is, I think, unique to your choreography, but also serves all dancing, really. So I would say there's a use of stillness and form that is very particular. There's no room to be decorative, but the clarity of the language and the movement is unique.
Can I
please.
just say something to? I don't work my dances hard because I'm a sadist.
No.
Because I think it's very important that every choreographer develops their own unique voice. So it's very easy to get into a situation where you're continually watching a generic language and you cannot tell one choreographer from another. It might be beautifully made and inventive, but I love to see those individual signatures, sort of hear those individual voices, if you like. And so why I work people hard is not only because I learned it from Marie Rombert, who probably was a sadist in some ways. And she'd be put in prison if she rehearsed you like today, as she did, 50 years ago. But because I want that voice to be clear, my unique movement, and I'm always, even with each separate ballet, I'm looking for a particular vocabulary for that particular piece. Yes, you can see general movements that I use in all my works, but each work should have its own trademark, if you like. And so that is why I have to work the dancers hard, because I need my movement to be clear. It shouldn't look like anybody else's, it should look like mine.
Tyler, do you want to
time
chime
is
in on that?
limited as well. I mean, don't you agree? Like it would be nice to spend 6 months working on it and learning it, but every time you come, it's sort of a new generation that is relearning or learning that style or relearning that style. It takes time.
What are your thoughts on the Bruciness, as Kelly calls it?
Well, I feel lucky that I've gotten to learn the past 2 works that have come through my time here, because I had been working on them in the back of the room, and we weren't marking it, we were doing it full out. So getting to step into Rooster, I feel like there's some familiarity with the movement and Chris's language. So I feel happy that he pushed us in that way, because here I am getting to perform it, but I feel comfortable in the language already because of the past experiences I've had working on the side.
Can you articulate at all what you think his movement language is, whether it's specifically about Rooster or as Kelly was trying to draw a line across all the ballets?
Yeah, I really find his movement quality so engaging with your mind, because you are using your full body, you're experimenting with balance and coordination, and you're really finding in your own body how to approach the steps in a way that portrays what he wants, and then it feels comfortable in your body too when you get to a certain point of reaching the calmness in your body. I just find it builds your technique for everything that we do for the rest of the day, I think, too. Yeah, you get to just experiment so much with the movement. It makes you a better dancer for sure.
All right, let's rewind a little or zoom out, I guess, and go back to a little bit more history. How did you make your way to Houston Ballet the first time?
How did I get here?
Yeah.
By the way, I just remembered when I stopped at Walter and had this sort of blackout, I think it's jet lag, but there was a wonderful choreographer called Walter Gore, who probably no one's ever heard of now, but again, a great choreographer that who was developed out of the Rambert Company. It's a beautiful work, and that was one of the, Tudor and Gore were my initial influences before Tetley and the American modern dance scene appeared. And then later, just watching Merce Cunningham's piece, the way he put the movement together. Anyway, I ended up in Houston because Ben Stevenson asked me, and he'd been asking me for a few years, but it was in the early 80s, and I was very busy. I think the 80s was my busiest ever decade, and I just couldn't get here. And also, you know, I have a family, a wife and family, and I was away too much. And one of my big regrets in life is that my career took me away from home far too often. So I couldn't make it. He kept asking me, and we'd meet up. I was working at London Festival Ballet, and suddenly he was there producing one of his pieces. And I'm a great admirer of Ben's work, actually. And so there was suddenly I had space, and he was on my mind. So I said, I can come. So and that's what happened. That's when I came and sat with Diane Walker-Clark, helping to teach Ghost Dances in 1987. And I came then, and then I came back for the premiere, I think in '88. And I just found it a wonderful company. What Ben had done, not just the technical quality of the dances, but the artistic quality. There was a kind of, it was quite subtle. You looked at the classics and you felt they really were born out of the 18th and 19th century. They had a sense of style that Ben could produce. Choreographically, they were beautiful. And so I liked his work ethic. He drove the dances. He was tough. You know, and Stanton's continued that kind of regime in a way, and that's why the dances are so fine here.
So why do you think, well, I guess more generically, what kind of dancer thrives in your work? What kind of dancer is a Christopher Bruce dancer? I mean, you've worked with a lot of ballet companies, and you're speaking about Ben's classical tradition. What kind of dancer thrives in your work? Why ballet dancers? Period. That's what my two questions.
Many dancers have a natural versatility, and I thought Ben's company at that time did. And they found the work tough. I remember my first day, we worked, I think, something like 6 hours, long day, and I was shattered on that first day. And I went into the shower, and I came away out of the dressing room. It was quite late. I must have dinner and go to bed. And as I passed, I think it was Studio B, it wasn't the main studio, there were so many of the company. This was gone 7 o'clock at night. They were practicing the steps that we taught them, that they were really struggling with. And I was just impressed. And we came in the next day, and the whole standard of the material we taught the day before was way higher than it was on that first day. I just loved the way they committed to the work. They were obviously enjoying it, thank goodness. And that really affected me. I was stunned in a way. I'd always had good time working with other companies, but I was just so impressed. It stood out. And you ask what dancers, if a dancer is versatile enough to understand the basics of contemporary dance, it's useful. Ideally, I think all dancers should be trained in contemporary dance. It does not damage your classical technique. It actually enhances it. Because if you look at the Graham technique, it's using all the classical methods of opposition, the use of the back. It's all there. The difference is being able to fall off the weight and travel across the stage, move laterally. and have that power and get down into the ground. You know, this, you see ballet dancers after one of my rehearsals, they're holding their thighs because they're not used to being so low with their weight. They're used to popping up, and I'm always saying, don't pop up. Stay down in your plie, move laterally. And if they have modern technique, it's ideal. And if they don't have modern technique, but I feel they can move, then I bully them and drive them until they have it. And what was wonderful about working with this company so often over a period of time, there was a large group within the company who could just do my work so easily. And that was very useful. There was a core of people which I kept trying to add to. I just bring people in all the time. And that's how this company got so good at doing my work, I think.
Practice.
Practice.
Yeah.
It's perfection, my father would say, in his Aberdonian accent.
So are there, I mean, I think that you gave the answer to this question, but a challenge of working with a ballet dancer is the uprightness or the lightweight of it, would you say? Is that ballet dancers to do your work should have ballet training, but, right?
Yeah.
Are there challenges with ballet dancers that you find to get them to do your work?
Yeah, it's finding the root of the movement, and the root of the movement is here. It's moving down. It's moving with strength. Feeling that the air you're pushing with the hand is actually heavy, and that gives otherwise it can look very lightweight. You use an arm, can look peripheral, but if it has pressure, and you feel that everything's coming from here, from the Graham contraction and release, that gives the movement a power, and it's a force, it's a real force. If you see the Graham company, it's a beautiful thing to watch and enables you just to say more. I think, you know, a lot of my work, I read very early as a child, and a lot of my work comes from the literature. It comes from literature and movies I've seen, sort of not so much from within the dance world. I've always had one foot outside the dance world, either in family life, which took me away in my gardening and my building, or my other hobbies. And then I come back into dance, but I bring the worlds. And I say the worlds in plural, because it was just not my own personal life and my life, family life, which affected Hush, with Mum being my wife in a sense, being Marion as a mother, seeing what she went through and what my mother went through, and trying to put it into those little duets and solos, sort of contain it. So that's where my work comes from. It comes from life, experience, and also from what I've read and learnt.
Well, that's a beautiful segue to my next question, which is, I think this is a quite simplistic categorization of your work, but when I look at least the ballets that I know, they seem to fall simplistically into two categories, the political and the personal. And I wondered if we could start maybe with ghost dances as an example, it being the first Bruce ballet in the Houston Ballet repertoire, but also is an example of a ballet that has political content. Again, I think there's a universality to it that a lot of your work has, so it isn't locked in one particular place and time, but it is political in nature. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Ghost Dances came out of reading a book by Joan Harder, an English dancer who her second marriage was to Victor Jara, who was a folk singer and poet in Chile, and and they were supporters of the Allende government. So when Pinochet took power, he arrested Victor. He was tortured and killed. And Joan couldn't find him, didn't know what had happened to him. and then someone knocked on her door that worked in the mortuary and said, I think Victor is there. So she went to the mortuary and found his body. They'd broken his hands. He was a guitarist and folk singer. And so he wouldn't be able to play a guitar, but then they shot him. And anyway, after the funeral, she and her two daughters left Chile and returned to England. I think she was probably saved by the fact that she was English, she was British, and had a passport and could get away. And she wrote a book about this time, and it affected me deeply. And that was the basis of Ghost Dances. One has to squish it into, a period of 25, 26 minutes, 30 minutes. But to tell a story, it's like Swan Song. In 35 minutes I tried to talk about years of imprisonment of a prisoner of conscience. And you find a kind of an edited language, and you try to say what you have to say in a almost naive and simple way to bring it across. And that's what I did with Ghost Dances.
I mean, but that is I think why the pieces still resonate, because you have distilled, you started with that specific story, but because you have to, as you say, squish and distill and not use any words at all, you've somehow created a political ballet that was inspired by a particular time, but then can be viewed again when history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but we have another situation like that, right? I mean, is that distillation of her experience makes it applicable at other times?
What is important to me, and this is true, okay, I set it in the Andes, and it has a South American feel, it's South American music, but it could be, you could say this was representative of stuff happening all over the world now. Terrible things are happening and always have had. And I think it isn't that I set off wanting to make a statement, because you make a statement, you can speak or write. I wanted to make a good dance, a good ballet, in which I could make people feel something about a particular situation. With all my work, some of it is more easy to understand than others, but I think what I love about dance is it isn't using the concrete language of words. It's using a language of movement which can be interpreted separately by every member of the audience. For me, the dance is a collage of ideas, and it has a depth. I read a biography of Tchaikovsky, and I was so pleased what he said about dance at one point. I can't remember it exactly, but he was saying what I felt, that with dance, you can say actually more in movement than words, because it's not defining. The words tend to define and confine your imagination. And with dance, your imagination can take flight and see more. And then another night you come back, you see it again, and you can interpret it differently. And that is the beauty of dance.
And what that's beautiful, because I keep using this word distilling. You're distilling something, whether it's a story or an idea or that experience of the book you read, to its essence, and then you give that out, and every audience member feels different things when they watch it, and that's okay, because you're even in a political piece, you're not trying to say, view it this way. This is what is happening, right?
There should be ambiguity. I think there's power in ambiguity. And I just mentioned the word imagination, and I should say right now that imagination is where it starts with any artist, choreographer, writer, painter. It starts, we all have it, and it should be out of that imagination, beautiful things can be created.
Don't you consider yourself to be a director in a way? I mean, you're making the steps, but you're also directing the audience's eye.
A choreographer is the writer and the director, but the words are in movement, and he's directing the action. So he's doing both things. I was having a kind of quite difficult conversation with my wife recently because we're working on a new piece to Leonard Cohen songs. And I've loved these songs for so long, so it's very much part of me. And we were discussing an element of the design, because she's designing the piece, but we were disagreeing awfully politely, but it was getting a little tense at one point. It said, you have to realize that I am the director, and I have to, in the end, say whether I like what you're giving me as design. It's not that I didn't like it, but it was a little detail that I thought, should we try this? So, yeah, you have to be in control. So, yeah, it's a bit of a power trip in a way, but that's the way it has to be.
Before we transition to Hush and Rooster, Kelly, I wonder if you wanted to say anything, having danced ghost dances, about do you feel the weight of it having political origins as a dancer? Does that contribute to your experience as you interpret the role and share it with the audience?
I think so. You touched on you used the word feel, and I think that to be aware of how what you're doing can make an audience feel, and therefore understand. I think what a ballet like Ghost Dances makes you feel when you watch it is very palpable from within it and from the front. I mean, I think just the moment you see all this humanity in these roles you created, and then without like violence and rage, all of a sudden you just take them away, and it's really subtle. But you feel the violence of that, and you feel the permanence of it in such a quiet and perfectly you just create that so perfectly. I think you feel from within it that it's important and lasting and shared with every person and will continue on and on. So I would say that would be and now sharing it with the students, particularly at this moment in time, is powerful. And the sooner they learn that ballet, we all love ballet, and we do it for ourselves ultimately. It's such a gift. But the impact that these dances can have on in the community and in the world, and the sooner they understand that, the more enriching it will be for all of us, I think.
The power and responsibility that they have to convey that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I also I wanted to talk a little before we move into Rooster. I wanted to talk a little bit about Hush, because I think you're alluding a little to this, Kelly, in what you're saying about ghost dances. But I think we perform as Houston Ballet at the giant Brown Theater, and there is a huge gulf really from the edge of the stage to where I generally sit. And yet somehow when I watch Hush, I feel like I'm the only person in the audience. That you've invited me in to this very personal, raw, intimate experience. And I felt the need to tell you that, because it's that I have that intimacy at the Brown is kind of rare. But I wonder that's a big question. How do you do that? But sort of I want to talk about the relationships, and I think having the person who originated the role of mother talk a little bit about how you created the vocabulary and intimacy of that piece that you invite us into.
Well, with both Rooster and Hush, the inspiration came from the music. I love, with Rooster, I danced to these songs in the 60s, the early 70s, with my wife at parties. I always say that I'm getting a little deaf now, and I think it was because the music was always so loud at those parties, kids were popping away. And with Hush, when I was given this when I retired from the artistic directorship of the Rambert Company in 2002. I was given it by the orchestra, the Rambert Orchestra. It's when the company could still afford an orchestra. They can't now. And I just played it and instantly saw a dance. And I chose the tracks. And it just, it's a piece in a sense for children. There's a wonderful, naive quality about that music. I loved its innocence, but at the same time, there was a depth. And like the Ave Maria solo, I thought, okay, it talks about, that is about the Mother of Christ, but it's the eternal Mother. It's about so many of you out there, that process in life and what you go through. And it's tough. I've witnessed it. I remember my mum, with very little money, with a war, an invalided husband from the Second World War, very little money in the family, her going out to work, and that still somehow loving and feeding 4 children, allowing me to go, finding the money for my dance classes when I finally went. And then seeing what Marion, my wife, went through, the toughness, not only raising 3 children, but also forging a career for herself. As a couple, because of what we've done and what I've done in life, being away so often, we've had to be, to a certain extent, very lead almost separate lives, to be independent. And she went to art college. She got an MA in printmaking. She did all this while she was bringing up a family without me being around for a lot of the time. So all that goes into the work. And it feeds the work. It's what you are. You put yourself into your work. You feel, in a sense, sometimes naked in your emotions, but that's what artists do if they're true to themselves. But I have to say that however emotional something like Hush or Ghost Dances is, all the drama is there in the movement. The choreography should say it. Yes, there will be a feeling, it will go into the head, it will go into the face, but there should be no emoting. There should be no wrinkling of the brow, which Rambert, don't wrinkle your brow, Christopher. Dance. It's all in the movement. And so the body will say it. And that should be the essence of the dance. The dance should say it, not emotion. There is room for that. There's a different type of maybe dance, but it should never go into melodrama, except where you want it to. And
Use melodrama sparingly?
Like working with Lindsay Kemp, that had to be melodramatic. When we did Cruel Garden, there was melodrama in the piece. You could do it. There was time to scream.
Kelly, what about the process of creating the mother? You weren't yet a mother when you did it. How did you become? How did you? I want to just hear about the creation of Mother, from what Christopher's saying to what it became.
I think his process is really, one stitch at a time and very present in that moment. You really create it together in the room and layer and layer and layer and layer. Hush is very detailed, particularly as a family unit. When you're all together, it's very, this person creates an action which has an effect on this person, and then this member of the family reacts. And that all took a long time to build, but was so engaging. And then as far as the mother particularly, it was, I mean, I think similarly, kind of down on the floor and one task at a time. And I know for me, it's a role that, like, over time, I've grown a lot more understanding of in depth. I mean, from being 24 to now, it was my last dance when I finally had my own daughter, and now teaching it, I think you really captured the loneliness, right? It can be really lonely. And I think even now getting to spend time with Marion in England, I don't think she had even like fully admitted that, what a love letter Hush was to her. That Hush was such a love letter to her. It sounded like she hadn't even fully realized it, you know, when we spent that time together. But yeah, I think...
Sorry to
Go
interrupt.
at it.
Marion was saying the other day, that was a very difficult collaboration, Chris. We nearly had a divorce over that.
She did the costuming.
Because I do get tired as I get older, you know, in the studio, and I would get back to the hotel, and it must have been awful. Probably awful was quite difficult to live with, but I was pretty awful over that because I was putting so much into those days of creating. Anyway, I interrupted.
I don't think you were awful to us. I don't remember that. Maybe you just took it out.
Well, so
Yeah.
I do feel we should transition a little bit to Rooster, even though I could probably talk about Hush all day. But it's also quite personal. It's not as Kelly's illustrating for us, that feeling of loneliness that we get from the mother in Hush, but it is definitely still personal. It's about relationships. The people on stage, they're more strutty, they're more sassy, I guess, than any of the characters in Hush. But there's definitely still about normal people and their relationships with one another. Would you say that's true, Christopher? Do you recognize the people in Rooster?
Because
Is it echoing for you?
it is echoing.
Yeah. I was just saying that I think Rooster it's strutty, it's sassy, it's more presentational than Hush. However, it's still about people. It's still
Yeah.
about regular people.
I think all my work is about humanity. How can it be anything else? You know, how do you feel? You know, I'm a human being, and I see other people's experiences, and I'm interested in the technical challenge of putting that into a language of movement. So for me, as I say again, it's not just about what I have to say, it's about constructing a well-made dance and finding a vocabulary for it. And let's see what we can find in it, which will convey ideas and feelings to an audience. With Rooster, it's a celebration of the music and the times. And I have to say, you know, when I was a young man, I was as chauvinistic as all my friends. And you know, it was that generation. So much has changed, you know, in the last sort of 50, 60 years, on the whole. Not everywhere, and not to everyone. But, you know, in a sense, there's a celebration of women's rights, really, in this piece, because it's the women observing the chauvinistic behavior and the preening of the cockerel, and sort of being far more intelligent about it, knowing what's happening. They love these guys, but they're not going to put up with this crap, you know. They're going to fight back. So there's a real battle of the sexes going on. But there are some serious themes woven into it. And I like people to look for that in the piece, particularly in the Ruby Tuesday, who is this mad lady? I always saw her, it was based on a lady that used to live in Chiswick, where the Rambert headquarters were. She used to have a bicycle and plastic bags, and she was crazy. This is wonderful. Once I was cycling on the pavement, which I shouldn't have been, and she hit me with one of her bags and knocked me off my bicycle. And she told me off, and I heard that she was quite, one day she'd been a concert pianist, but lost her mind at one point. And I thought, what happens to these people one sees talking to themselves in the park or walking along the road? And this lady somehow lost her mind, and maybe it was too much, taking too many illicit, substances as a teenager, as many people did in that time. I didn't, honestly. Who is Ruby Tuesday? And my imagination conjured up this lady who's still dancing and living in her own world, but in the past it had some kind of tragedy. There's a suggestion at one point where she's almost rocking a child, maybe like she's had a child, but that child is gone, it's been taken away or whatever. And I put those little ideas into the collage of the dance. And it ends up as it ends up,
Tyler, you're learning a couple of parts. Who are tell us a little bit about the characters or the women. Do you agree that it's do you feel it's a battle of the sexes for you?
Yeah, I'm learning the Rooster girl and the Ruby Tuesday girl. And I would say for Rooster, I definitely feel like we're kind of eye rolling at the guys and just showing that we can be strong as well, and just as I would say the boys are more entitled, and the girls show up and are like, we can do the same thing you're doing too, but we'll let you do it in the front, and then like he said for Ruby Tuesday, you're like disassociating and you're in your own kind of world. So, yeah, that's my addition.
Kelly, do you want to add anything to those characters, or were you also the?
I was the fadeaway, and there's a lot of
Oh,
watching him like have his own personal party on the floor, and then getting him up when that's been enough, and sending him off.
Same idea, tolerating it.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have time for a couple of questions. Jasmine's going to help out with that. Reminder that it's helpful for us to hear the question in the mic so that everyone else can hear it. Anything you're dying to know? Raise your hand if you're a Rolling Stones fan. Oh, I have a question. And this is maybe really for all three of you. I know this is your music, your growing up music. Do you feel, do the dancers today know who the Rolling Stones are? Do you feel like you get in the studio and they're, yes, you guys know? Okay.
I have a question. Were there any tracks that didn't make it into Rooster that you were on the fence about? Oh, I'm doing the thing.
Yeah.
Any tracks that you were considering for Rooster that didn't make it into the ballet? That any songs that you were on the fence about? I've always wondered.
Oh, there were many tracks I could have used, but somehow the themes that run through the piece, these are the tracks that I used, were the tracks that I knew I could maintain the theme of the chauvinistic behavior and the battle going on. Taking it in, as tears go by, taking it into the school playground, where kids can be so cruel to each other. And what's happening in that playground still happens later on as people grow up sometimes, the cruelty.
So they're
Yeah.
they're not necessarily your favorite Stones songs. They're
Oh,
the
no,
ones
I
that were right for the piece.
Oh, there were lots of Stones. You know, I don't always choose music I love. Composers over the years have sent me so much music. I've often enjoyed it. There's so much great music from Mozart to Beethoven to Schumann, etc. And I love it as music, but I haven't seen that I could make a dance to it. People like Jacques Lussier sent me all these LPs, and I loved his music, but I had to write back and say, Jacques, I don't see a dance. You know, I can't. I'll keep listening, and a lot of people, especially after I'd started using popular music, you know, the Stones, John Lennon with Dream. You probably don't know that work. The Waterboys, and Bob Dylan, other rock musicians would send me a hand.
Yeah, you made me think. When you have a political ballet like Swan Song, what came first? Did you have the idea and then look for the music, or did you have music and that inspired the idea?
I'm just going to repeat the question real quick. For a political piece like Swan Song, did the idea come first and then the music, or the music and then the idea?
Again, it came from a book. A book by Oriana Fallaci, Italian journalist, who wrote a book about a Greek anarchist who was imprisoned for trying to blow up a car full of colonels from the regime. And he was tortured, he was held in solitary confinement, and the story was the basis of that. I tried in that work to sort of express what it must have been like to be interrogated for weeks and weeks at a time, and then left in a cell on your own. And what went on, he said he lost his mind at one point. So I had this idea of the light coming through the window, and the solos are they're full of bird-like movement, using the wings and spreading, and it's about flying, the image of being able to fly towards the light and escape through the window. So it came from a book.
And then you searched for music to support that in that case, because you were saying about Hush, you saw the ballet from the music, but for Swan Song, did you then go looking?
The music for Swan Song was created by Philippe Chambon, who would come into the studio with me. I started just counting with counts, and I started doing the solos in silence, and he would come in and watch, and start producing music for the dance I'd already made, or half made. And then he would leap ahead of me, because I'd tell him my ideas, and he'd come in with something that would inspire me. For instance, the last solo, which is like South American flute music, partly. So that's how the collaboration happened. It was wonderful. It was like he wrote the music also for nature dances, which I made here, I think in 1991, and he came here, he was working in a studio. He'd be in the studio with me during the day, and then he'd go off to a sound studio and work most of the night to create the score for Nate, and he created a beautiful score for that.
Thank you.
Go for it.
So I'm wondering, when you use the Stones music, have any of the Stones seen this piece? Is there a dialogue? What do they think about the way you interpreted the music?
So the question is, has the Rolling Stones, any of the Stones, seen the piece? Have they been in dialogue with Christopher about the work?
When we made this piece in Geneva, I'd made the piece, I'd finished it, and the director, Vladimir Pankov, came to me ashen-faced and said, Chris, ABCO, the company that owns the rights to these early recordings, have forbidden us to use the music. So I went back to London and I got in touch with Mick Jagger's office and we met and talked. He made it work. He contacted Klein and we got permission. And then Mick asked me to work with him on a video, Sweet Thing, a single. And I worked on the dance sections for that video. And then I gave the work to London Contemporary Dance Theatre in London. And the same thing happened. We'd finished teaching it, and they declined to give us permission again. So the chairman of the board, a lord, John something or other, John wrote on House of Lords paper to Alan Klein, and that sort of impressed him enough. And then touch wood. Since then, we've been okay. It's been done on 22, 23 companies around the world, and we've up to now got permission. So the same thing happened. And then when we did it in London, Mick and the family and his then wife came and saw the show, and then came on stage afterwards. But the Prince Andrew was there that night because he was an honorary member of the London Contemporary Dance Theatre Company, or the board or something. And so he came on and spoke to the dancers, and we did, the usual thing. And when he'd gone, then Mick came. He wouldn't come at the same time. So it was royalty appearing after royalty. So the difference of it. And he was great, and he's always supported the piece. And, a good man. And we're both cricket lovers. I often see him on television at Lord's, when England are playing at Lord's. But that's a cricket you don't know anything or understand anything about. It's quite complex.
Maybe that's your next ballet, cricket.
I wanted to make a dance about cricket because I love cricket. And visually on that green, the white on the green, I thought it could look beautiful. But a girl called Janet Smith made a wonderful ballet called, I can't remember what it was called actually, but it was great, and it was very simple but beautiful. And I thought, well, I can't do better than that, so I won't bother.
All right, can we say thank you to Christopher Bruce, Kelly Meyernick, and Tyler Donatelli. Thank you for joining us, everybody. This program opens a week from Thursday. Please come see it. Thank you so much.